Hello viewers, welcome to Ngal Fashion Store. My name is Chidera and today I'll be reacting to a video titled Kirk Trigger Climate Change Radical. Please stay tuned and don't touch that dial. Thank you.
Hi, Mr. Kirk. I think climate change is a much more serious issue than the conservative movement gives it credit for, and so my question is, what common ground can we find regarding climate action, and how can we get more conservatives in on the movement? What can we find that we agree on?
Cool. I just want to make sure I understand where you're coming from, and this is not a trick question. Can you define what you mean by climate change?
Primarily reducing carbon emissions and other greenhouse gases.
Got it. So is your argument that rising global temperatures are tied to carbon emissions?
To my understanding, the scientific consensus is quite solid on that, yes.
Got it. Okay. So, again, not a trick question. What is carbon? It's not a trick question.
Okay. It's an element.
Yeah, right.
And carbon dioxide traps heat in the atmosphere.
Right.
So,
So carbon is life, right? So carbon, yeah, exactly. You can't have life without
I've heard this before, though, and the
Yeah,
idea that carbon is plant food is great, but the reality is when there's 40 billion tons being emitted a year by a network of global factories and global tailpipes, that absolutely has an impact on climate. And
Right,
I'm
so-
disappointed that this is the reaction
Well, hold
to
on.
the question, honestly, because I don't know how you all, we're in an agricultural area, we're seeing it worse every year. It's getting
Well, hold on,
bad,
let me ask
and
a question.
I don't know why conservative movement insists on resisting the scientific
Well, I'm not resisting.
consensus
I'm
on it.
asking what carbon is. Okay, so let's make sure we're clear on what I'm saying. Do you think there could be other explanations as to why global temperatures are rising,
Yes.
such as?
They've studied them, and it's not due to anything other than the emissions, is to my
Okay, so
understanding.
not solar flares, global tilt.
Well, they've accounted for those, and they've found out that those are not the main drivers of the climate change that we're seeing.
Okay, so you trust, I just want to make sure I understand, you trust consensus from scientists that put forward reports?
No, I trust ExxonMobil's own scientists who found this out in the 1980s and hid the findings for decades so that they wouldn't lose money.
Right. So, excuse me, just as a kind of side note, I'm unbelievably skeptical when I hear scientists say, but let's pretend you're right. Okay, let's pretend that climate change is an existential threat. Would that be something that you say?
To our existence, to the human species, probably not. I imagine the
Okay.
rich will always find an ark to live in while the rest
Well,
of us have our crops fail.
you have some nuance, so that's fair. So let's talk then about, let's pretend you're right. Let's say that there's some solutions. What would be a solution? Should we get rid of fossil fuels?
You know, if we could just filter out it's the carbon that's doing it. So I don't know about
Well, no,
getting off
you're
of fossil fuels, but if we could
see,
find
that's why I
a way
asked
to
about your
filter out the
premise.
carbon.
The amount of certainty you have in a planet that is so massive with such unbelievable biodiversity to immediately act that we, the humans, are the only reason that global temperatures might be going up, I think is a flawed hypothesis. Because if you're wrong, then we might try to find a solution that actually might be more about private property confiscation and wealth deterioration, aka Marxism, not actually solving the problem. That's why I challenge the hypothesis. What else might be contributing to it? So let's just ask some very basic questions. So if carbon is the problem, would you support planting 1 trillion trees?
Yes.
Okay, good. We agree. So that
Sequestering
wouldn't.
carbon is part of the solution. I think there's a broader set of solutions than what the Democratic Party specifically has been bringing to the table. But again, this resistance by the conservatives to just
So let me
not
ask you,
acknowledge that this carbon is an issue.
why do you think
Very
why do you think we ask questions? Because we're dumb, or why do you think?
Skepticism with good reason.
Okay, good. No,
Yeah.
okay,
but
good.
at some point, when in looking for the answer, you need to acknowledge that the answer can be found, and the answer has been found. People have spent their lives and careers studying this for decades. It's been over 100 years ago since people were first talking about the idea that carbon was trapping heat. So this is not a new idea.
Do you have any fear that the solution might be worse than the problem?
What solution? Sure, some, yeah.
Like, for
But I'd like
example,
to broaden-
mandatory electric vehicles?
Oh, no, electrical vehicles will mine the ocean to death before we get everyone an electric car. It's not a solution.
Yeah, I mean, that's also, cobalt's really, really bad for the environment.
Yeah, we need to go car-free and build walkable communities again, actually.
No, that's a very bad idea. See, now we're getting somewhere, okay? Bad idea. Cars are freedom, right? Without a vehicle, you are a captive of the government in an open-air prison, right? And so, just look at San Francisco.
It just means you can walk to the grocery store without needing a vehicle.
Right. That's a 15-minute city model. But no, this is important, and we're not going to
I've been studying architecture for 4 years. I've been studying a little bit of urbanism too.
Right.
It's not taking away your freedoms, the fact that you get to go to a grocery store and a library and a coffee store within a 15-minute walk, folks.
Okay.
That's actually independence from the automobile. But that's
But let me. Independence is being able to go where you want to go when you want to go there. That's what independence
Yeah.
is. But let me. We're not going to find.
Then?
Here's the one thing that I want to make sure. I don't get this from you because you're coming at it from a good place. The panic over climate becomes such a priority by people that also have the solution in mind. I'm not saying it's you, right?
It's fair.
And
That's
so
fair.
we have a built-in healthy skepticism over the last decade that we are being constantly lied to by the same amount of cabal of criminals, and at the very least, exaggerating the threat, okay? Exaggerating the threat, where we are told we must take our freedoms and liberties away. We must reconfigure our life. And I'll be very honest with you, that with all of the pressing challenges that face humanity, like the most suicidal generation in history, the most drug-addicted generation in history, the most alcohol-addicted generation in history, the fixation on an abstraction of rising global temperatures is an academic distraction from real material suffering that people have when the activists, not necessarily you, but the loudest activists, AOC, Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, Bernie Sanders, they want to get rid of fossil fuels, they want to disenfranchise millions of people of work, and they want to basically put the entire grid in an unrealistic solar, wind, and turbine type model.
Mr. Kirk, you sound so much like the liberal coastal elites that you rail against, because the reality is the first year that my family bought cows, 2012, we had a record-breaking drought, and hay had to be trucked in from Oklahoma or Texas. The following spring, it rained so hard and so much it broke records, and the bridges washed out, and my mother couldn't get to work. So this is very much a real issue.
Let me ask you,
We're
in the
an
last 50
agricultural
years,
region.
have there been irregular weather patterns in the 60s, 70s, or 80s? Yes. I would just close with this. You could talk to any rancher or farmer here in Missouri. Unpredictability is part of the agrarian lifestyle. To act as if you could perfectly model it, and but here's the one thing about climate change that drives me crazy, and I'll just close with this, is that no matter what happens, it gets warmer, it's climate change, it gets colder, it's climate change, it's tornado, it's climate change, it's sunny, it's climate change. It's the one thing that confirms the hypothesis regardless of the result. And so it's the perfect thing to argue for. You might be right. I don't think you are, that rising global temperatures are necessarily tied to human activity. But every solution I hear, every solution would obliterate the American economy and destroy our ability to use our greatest asset, with is fossil fuels, natural gas, liquid natural gas, and oil. Thank you so much. I got to get to the next question. Thank you.
Climate change refers to the long-term shift of temperature and weather patterns. Human activities has been the main driver of climate change due to the burning of fossil fuels like coals, gas, and oil. So, is carbon dioxide the main contributor to climate change? Indeed, carbon dioxide is a byproduct of fossil fuels combustion. Fossil fuel combustion is the principle of greenhouse gas contributing to global warming. Burning fossil fuels, which results in carbon pollution, which causes climate change. So if we want to eradicate fossil fuels in our daily life in the world, we need to understand that there's going to be an economic depression. Eradication of burning of fossil fuels can also be replaced by alternative of renewable energy, nuclear power, and biomass and geothermal energy. So I'd like to know your opinion on the fossil fuel. I'd like to know your